Welcome to the deep dive. You're with us because you want to get smart, fast on topics you care about using the sources you provide.
And we're here to help you do just that.
Today, we're diving into something I think you'll find really interesting. The La Mancha wine region in Spain.
Yep, all based on those excerpts you sent over, simply titled La Mancha.
Our mission today, pretty straightforward. Unpack the key stuff about La Mancha's wines. We're talking history, the land itself, the terroir, and where things seem to be heading.
And let's kick things off with a bit of a wow fact.
Oh, yeah. Go on.
La Mancha isn't just a big wine region in Spain. It is the biggest.
The biggest. Seriously.
Yeah, the absolute largest in the country, and actually one of the largest wine-producing areas anywhere in the world.
Wow. Okay, so maybe a bit of a sleeping giant then.
You could definitely say that. The source material really hammers home the sheer scale right away. We're talking the largest on the whole Iberian Peninsula.
That's huge.
It is. And it's not just about size, It points to this incredibly deep-rooted tradition.
Right, a long history there.
Millennia, actually. It means wine isn't just a product. It's woven into the fabric of the place, the connection between people and the land. Historically, it was a powerhouse supplier.
And the sources confirm it's not a new thing either. Winemaking goes way back, Roman times even.
Roman times, and then really took off during the Middle Ages, especially with the monasteries.
So there's this incredible depth of history behind all that volume, and you can sort of picture the landscape the source describes, can't you?
Definitely. Those wide plains?
Yeah, the white houses, those iconic windmills everywhere, it sets a real scene.
It really does. And connecting that long history to what's happening now is fascinating. The source highlights a really significant shift.
A shift. In what way?
Well, from basically being known for, let's say, bulk table wine, mostly from the Arran grape, which is super reliable there,
Okay.
to a much more deliberate focus on quality. And diversity, too.
So moving beyond just quantity.
Exactly, yeah. It's described as moving de viñas de mesa a viños de calidad. It seems driven by a newer generation of winemakers aiming higher.
Right. The Arran grape comes up a lot in that historical context, doesn't it? The workhorse grape for volume.
It absolutely was. But the material really emphasizes this recent quality drive.
So what are they doing differently now?
Well, diversification's key. They're planting and making more wine from reds, like Tempranillo, they call it Sensabel locally,
Sensabel, got it.
and Garnacha, Syrah, even Cabernet Sauvignon. Plus, whites like Verdeo and Sauvignon Blanc are really gaining ground.
So it sounds like they're trying to build a clearer identity, something more complex than just being the biggest, competing globally, maybe?
That seems to be the goal, to show the world what La Mancha can really do beyond just volume.
And I guess that identity has to come from the place itself, the terroir.
Absolutely. The terroir, the climate and soil combination is fundamental. The source spends a good chunk of time on this.
So what's it like there?
Well, the climate is described as clima continental extremo. Think really hot, dry summers,
Oh, hot.
like potentially over 40 degrees Celsius hot. But crucially, big temperature drops at night.
Okay. That day-night swing is important, isn't it?
Hugely important. The source explains it helps the grapes keep their acidity, even with all that heat, which means better balance, more complex aromas in the wine.
Right, stops them from getting just sort of flabby and overripe.
Exactly. And then you've got cold winters, frost is a real thing, plus very little rain, and it's unpredictable.
So irrigation must be essential then.
In many areas, yes. The source makes that clear. This combination of heat and dryness puts stress on the vines.
Stress sounds bad, but it can be good for grapes, right?
It often is, yeah.
Yeah.
Lower yield sometimes, but the flavors get really concentrated. Like the vine is focusing all its energy into fewer but more intense grapes.
Quality over quantity right there in the vineyard.
Okay, slice.
Okay, so that's the climate. What about the soil? The source mentioned variety there.
It did. The dominant type is clay limestone.
And that's good because...
Well, the clay holds onto water deep down, which is vital in a dry place. And the limestone part, that's linked to freshness, acidity, and sometimes a kind of minerality in the wines.
Interesting. But there are other soils too.
Yeah, mentions of sandy and silty soils too, which tend to lead to lighter styles of wine.
And that clay limestone, does it affect how the vines grow?
It forces the roots to dig really deep, searching for that water.
Right.
And as they go down, they pick up different minerals from the soil layers, which again contributes to flavor concentration and those aromatic compounds.
So the source connects this terroir directly to specific grapes.
It does. It talks about how Arran is naturally suited to the drought, giving those light, fresh whites.
Right.
Then Tempranillo or sensible, loves the heat. It gets really ripe, high sugar, mature tannins, perfect for those fuller-bodied reds.
Makes sense.
And it also mentions Verdeo adapting really well, giving aromatic, refreshing whites despite the tough climate.
Okay, so the land shapes the grapes, but who sets the rules for making the wine?
That brings us to the regulatory side, the denomination of origin, the Dio La Mancha, established back in '73.
Right, the DO, like
Yeah,
in other European regions.
exactly. The source stresses its role in setting standards. Which grapes are allowed? Maximum yields per hectare.
So controlling quantity to help quality.
That's a big part of it, yeah. Also regulating vineyard practices, winemaking techniques. It's all about quality control and protecting the region's name.
And has it worked? Has it helped with that shift towards quality?
The excerpt suggests it's played a really important role, yeah. Improving quality and boosting the region's image, both in Spain and internationally. It gives consumers a baseline guarantee.
Okay. Now the source then does something interesting it brings in. Don Quixote.
Yeah, it's a nice touch. It talks about the cultural influence, literature.
Does Cervantes actually write about the wine much?
Apparently not in great detail, no. The source acknowledges that. But it highlights the strong cultural connection. La Mancha, Don Quixote, windmills, and wine is part of that picture.
So it's more symbolic.
Kind of. It suggests Quixote's idealism, that striving spirit, maybe mirrors the winemakers aiming for authenticity and quality today. It's more atmospheric than a direct wine review from the book.
As a layer to the identity, though.
Definitely.
Okay, so from culture back to the vineyard, how do they actually manage the vines there? The source mentions different techniques.
Right. It talks about the traditional en vaso or bush vine system, often used for Arran, suits the drought well.
Bush vines, right, low to the ground.
Exactly. But it also notes more en espaldera, now trellised vines, especially for other varieties.
Why the change to trellises?
Better control, easier to manage yields, and it helps with mechanization, like machine harvesting.
Different grapes, different needs. Makes sense. And controlling yield seems key.
Critical. The source mentions pruning, of course, but also green harvesting.
That's removing some grape bunches early on.
Yeah, exactly. To focus the vine's energy on ripening fewer, better grapes.
But it sounds like a tough place to grow grapes overall. Drought is a big issue.
Huge. The source calls it a major challenge. Constant need for really careful, efficient irrigation.
And the heat.
Another big one. Growers use techniques like canopy management, using the leaves to shade the grapes, and even harvesting at night when it's cooler to protect the grapes' freshness and aromas.
Wow, night harvesting. And what about the future with climate change?
That's a big focus in the source material. They're actively looking at adapting, trying new grape varieties more tolerant to heat and drought, smarter water management, even things like agroforestry, integrating trees potentially to create better microclimates.
So they're really thinking ahead.
Seems like it. Plus, there's a growing emphasis on sustainability and organic farming, which fits with global trends.
And technology.
Yep, playing a role too. Sensors in the vineyard, drones for monitoring, precision viticulture. It's all about being more efficient and targeted.
Okay, so lots happening in the vineyard. What about in the winery? How do they make the wines? Let's start with whites, like Anne.
For Arran whites, the source highlights keeping things fresh. Night harvesting helps. Then cool fermentation, usually in stainless steel tanks.
To preserve those delicate aromas.
Exactly, and generally not much oak influence to keep them light and bright.
Okay, and rosé. What's the approach there?
Mostly from Tempranillo, Garnacha, maybe Syrah. Brief skin contact for that pink color.
Right, just a little bit.
Then cool fermentation again, typically stainless steel, aiming for that dry, fresh style.
Got it. Now, the reds. Tempranillo and the others.
Standard process mostly.
Right.
Destemming, crushing the grapes. Fermentation often in stainless steel or sometimes cement tanks.
Cement. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's becoming popular again in many places.
Yeah.
Then maceration, leaving the juice with the skins to get color, tannins, flavor.
How long?
Varies depending on the wine style.
Yeah.
And then aging, especially for Reserva and Grand Reserva wines.
In oak barrels?
Yep, French and American oak are mentioned. But the source also notes interest in using other things, like those cement tanks or even traditional clay amphoré for aging.
A mix of old and new techniques, then.
Definitely. And the source emphasizes the winemaker's role, the enoenologist.
Balancing everything.
Right, acidity, tannin, alcohol, fruit, trying to get the best expression of the terroir in the bottle.
And it mentions something about yeasts.
Indigenous yeasts, yeah. Moving away from standard commercial yeasts to use the ones naturally present on the grapes or in the winery.
Why do that?
Can add unique character, more complexity, a stronger sense of place. It's another trend towards authenticity.
Okay, so all this leads to the different wine styles. What do they actually taste like? What's the sensory profile? Let's start with whites again.
Arin, typically subtle.
Hmm.
Thick, light white fruits, maybe some floral notes, generally light-bodied, fresh, easy to drink.
And Verdejo.
More aromatic, more vibrant citrus, maybe some grassy or herbal notes, often a distinct minerality and crisper acidity, a different beast altogether.
Quite a contrast. And the rosés.
Mostly Tempranillo-based, described as having fresh red fruit flavors, think strawberry, raspberry, dry, good acidity, refreshing.
Sounds perfect for a warm day. What about the reds? You mentioned young versus aged Tempranillo.
Yeah, so young Tempranillo, the Joven, is all about bright, fresh, red and black fruits. Easy drinking, not too complicated.
Okay.
But when it's aged Crianza, Reserva, Gran Reserva, it gets way more complex. Those fresh fruit notes evolve, and you start getting spice, maybe leather, tobacco, vanilla from the oak, more structure, more depth.
And the other reds mentioned, Cabernet and Syrah.
Cabernet Sauvignon shows its typical character. Blackcurrant, maybe some cedar, firm tannins, good structure. Syrah tends to be expressive dark fruits. Black pepper, sometimes violets, can be quite powerful.
So a really wide range available then.
Absolutely. This source summarizes the styles.
Hmm.
Young wines, the age categories, Crianza, Reserva, Gran Reserva, some sparkling wine, often from Arin,
Sparkling Aran. Interesting.
and even small amounts of sweet and fortified wines. Something for pretty much everyone.
And they give tasting tips.
Brief ones, yeah. Serving temperatures, suitable glasses, the usual helpful pointers.
Good stuff. Now, you can't talk wine without talking food, right?
Never. And the source covers pairings with La Mancha's own cuisine.
Starting with Manchego cheese, I bet.
You got it. The classic pairing. Fresh or semi-cured Manchego with young whites or rosés.
And the aged cheese.
That needs something with more structure. Cured or aged Manchego pairs beautifully with aged Tempranillo or even Syrah.
Makes total sense. What about other local dishes? Lamb.
Lamb's a staple. The source suggests medium-bodied Tempranillo or Garnacha. For pork dishes, maybe reds with good acidity or even some richer white wines.
And those traditional stews they mentioned?
Right, duelos y quebrantos, maybe a young, fruity red. And for the heartier caldereta manchega, a classic lamb stew, an aged Tempranillo would be fantastic.
It sounds like what grows together goes together really applies here.
It often does. The source gives general tips too. Match intensity, look for contrast or complementary flavors, and yeah, regional pairings are usually a safe bet.
Okay, so let's look at the bigger picture, the market, the future for La Mancha wines.
The source comes back to the DO's importance, protecting quality, promoting the wines.
And it mentions specific producers driving quality.
It does, yeah. Names like Finca Elez, Volver, Canopy, Verum, Finca Antigua are highlighted as examples of wineries really focusing on quality.
What makes them stand out?
Often it's about focusing on specific grape varieties, expressing the terroir in a unique way, really pushing the quality envelope for the region.
And what are consumers looking for now? How does La Mancha fit in?
Well, the source points to the demand for value and quality. La Mancha seems well placed there.
Because they have the scale but are improving quality.
Exactly. There's also growing interest globally in white and rosé wines, which fits with La Mancha's diversification.
Sustainability, too.
Definitely mentioned as increasingly important to consumers. And storytelling people want to know the story behind the wine, the place, the people.
That connection matters more and more. But there are still challenges, right?
Oh, for sure. Overcoming that old bulk wine image is still a hurdle. Global competition is fierce. Climate change is an ongoing reality. And continued investment is needed.
Sounds familiar for many wine regions.
It is. But the source ends on a positive note, highlighting the potential of wine tourism, enopurism.
Bringing people to see the region, taste the wines.
Yeah, showcasing the landscape, the culture, the windmills, the food, and crucially, the improving wines. It can be a powerful tool.
So, wrapping it all up.
The main takeaway from the source is really about potential and evolution. La Mancha has this huge scale and deep history, but it's actively transforming.
Balancing tradition and innovation.
Perfectly put. Respecting the past while embracing new techniques, new grapes, a stronger focus on quality, and expressing that unique terroir. It's about valuing the wines for what they are now and what they're becoming.
It really is a fascinating picture of a region in transition, moving from being known primarily for quantity to really striving for and increasingly achieving recognition for quality and diversity.
Huge shift.
Which leads us to a final thought for you, our listener. How does a place so historically defined by volume manage to reshape its image on the world stage? Think about that journey, that rebranding effort. It makes you wonder about other regions, maybe even other products or industries facing similar challenges and evolutions in how quality is perceived. Something to chew on. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.